Welcome to Breaking Down Barriers, where we hear from the tech leaders in the ecosystem. Now, I'll start with giving you an intro. It's a big intro. So, Wael is one of the most influential data and AI leaders to come out of the Silicon Valley in the last 20 years. He built and led WhatsApp's global data organization, scaling it from 4 to over 200 across multiple continents, while the platform's user base doubled and its monetization strategy was defined and executed. Before that, he led teams at Google and YouTube. He worked on core data and AI systems that shaped the products used by billions, including Google Suggest, Google Ads UI, and the living room experience for YouTube on TV. He also became known as a leader that brought in to rescue critical projects and rebuild high-performing engineering cultures. Most recently, he's advising companies across the MENA ecosystem and beyond, and investors, leading data and AI initiatives that reduce fraud, improved operational efficiency, and supported market expansion across the region, giving him a unique perspective on how MENA tech can scale across the global standards. Why this conversation matters? Well, if you're a founder, if you're an investor, C-suite operator, government, or anyone building product and technology teams, Wael has seen what good looks like at planetary scale. He understands how to build and lead senior autonomous technical organizations, and he has a rare view on AI that's actually adopted inside real companies, not how it's marketed. So today, hopefully, won't be about the AI buzzwords. It's about how to get decisions get made, how teams get built, and how scale is achieved in the real world. So, welcome. I said it was a big intro.
Well, thank you, Ricci. It's always a pleasure, and I've always enjoyed talking with you. You yourself have done quite a lot. I mean, you've created an entire ecosystem here that has, even though I've been so busy lately in traveling, but I've really enjoyed it when I have been able to attend, and it's been a beautiful. Thank you. You have made the region a better place. We need more people like you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'd like to start with the human bit to begin with. So obviously you originally people don't know this, but you originally intended to become a math and algorithms professor.
Yeah.
What changed? What was the moment that shifted you towards AI and data?
Ah, boy, this is a fun story. So I grew up in obviously in the Middle East. My mom, I was born in Kuwait, and we survived the Gulf War. And my father is Lebanese, and in Lebanon was a lot of lots of wars throughout that time frame. In fact, I was born during the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, and so my life was fairly, my parents did an amazing job in keeping it extremely stable, but you're aware of the greater political context growing up in the Middle East and stuff. And I just happened to be particularly good at school, and I love teaching. So much so that in high school, I actually would run classes, and I would ditch school to go attend classes at the university and then come back and teach my classmates. And I thought the best thing I could do to help the region was to teach. It was my natural skill set and what I really enjoyed. And I'm very attached to this region. I'm not political, and I really just care about elevating the region. So I went to Stanford, got lucky enough to get a full scholarship there, and I attended. And there weren't at that time very few people from the Middle East went an undergrad. They always come in as a graduate student, and certainly none from Lebanon that I was aware of. So it was new, exciting. When I got into Stanford, I had to literally send them my textbooks, and they made me do SAT 2s, SAT 1s, and TOEFL, and a whole bunch of exams to ensure that I could be there. And while I got to Stanford, I was completely blown away by the quality of education that they had. I had an ego. I was naturally the best in classes in the Middle East. And so when I went to Stanford, I thought I could do that. I signed up for honors computer science, honors English, honors math, honors physics. And I dropped out of half of them. And then half of them I dropped out because I was not qualified, but also because of bad teachers. I had one teacher give us the entire wrong exam, and this was at Stanford, right? And so the professors and teaching was incredibly important to me, and I became a TA. One of the people who changed the course of my life, we actually met on opposite sides of a protest. He was on one side, I was on the other, and while we're sitting there and talking, we end up discussing a math problem. And so in the middle of this protest, while everyone else is waving flags, we got together and we started solving math problems. And then he sponsored me to become a PhD student. So I became his PhD student. His name was Gene Golub, one of the most amazing professors that I've ever had at Stanford. Others include Andrew Ng, include Bradley Efron, Tim Roughgarden, but Mark Mancall. But Gene really changed my life. And I wanted to follow in his footsteps. And I'm like, I just want to do what he does, but I want to do it in the Middle East. So my goal was that. And then what happened was my aunt died of breast cancer, and my uncle got sick with Alzheimer's. And their kids could not afford to go to college. And these kids are brilliant. So if they're listening to this, Layman and Lamis, they're brilliant kids. And they needed some financial assistance. And my dad called me up and said, "Hey, can you help them?" And I was the only one who could literally leave my job and get a 6-figure income right off the bat. And so I did. I joined Google with the objective of going back after 4 years to finish. And that's how I got into tech, right? I was already in computer science and math anyway.
Yeah.
There's more stories there on how that became other things, but that's how that worked.
Amazing. I mean, I love all of your stories and your
Thanks.
journey, and I'm sure we'll get into some others.
Yeah.
You saw firsthand how poor data leads to poor decisions in US Congress. So what is a decision you saw that changed like your worldview as well?
Yeah. So for the readers who aren't, or watchers or listeners who aren't aware, in the time I was in college, I volunteered and I dropped out of college for a little bit to work in U.S. Congress. I was Senator Hillary Clinton's legislative aide on foreign policy, and while I was there, I was part of, or I did not participate. Of course, I was way too junior, but I was. They had declared war on Iraq Part 2, and they used. I'll say I won't cite him directly, but they used a study which George Bush held in his hand and argued that democracies will spread peace, and that therefore we should spread democracy around the world. And I read that paper, and it did not make sense to me. I had a lot of problems with it, but I had up until this point been a math and computer science person. With a minor in Arabic literature. I was not a data statistics person, nor was I a political science, and so I did not have the tools to articulate why this analysis and research was not making sense to me, but it did not make sense. But it was used, and those things. And I realized that, oftentimes people will use data in any way that they can to explain whatever story that they want. And you see this time and time again happening. And so I actually left there and I went back to school and switched into studying the applications of data. I work with Tim Roughgarden on game theory, on stuff to better understand how to understand data and articulate the use cases and leverage it to make better decisions. And back then, it was before the rise of big data. So the decisions we're making were much smaller scale. Mm-hmm. It turned out to be the right career choice.
But you didn't know at the time, right? And if you think about that, so across Google, WhatsApp, the Mino ecosystem, like what is one thing that's maybe remained constant about what you're personally trying to solve?
A lot of people like to believe that they themselves are of high moral and integrity character. I also like to believe that of myself. I would like to leave the world a better place than it was that I inherited or I got. I want to build products that people can use that actually enrich their lives. And I want to help bring people closer together so we live in a happier lifestyle. As a younger version of me, I did not truly value the amount of liberation that economic security and stuff brings. I was much more focused on, is this a cool thing to build and use? Can we bring people together? Can I democratize information access, education? Those were the things I was more looking for. as I've gotten a little bit more older, I've realized that also helping generate capital and economic opportunity is really a big benefit to them. But ultimately, what has always kept me going is less about money and success and much more about, did I leave a good impact? Did I inspire people? And is the world a better place now than it was before? We're making better decisions with it.
No, I love that. I love that. So if we were to get inside your journey in the Silicon Valley, Google, YouTube, WhatsApp. So you worked on Google Suggest, Ads, UI, Chromecast, Living Room, Search, and Ads. Which project taught you the most about scale?
I mean, ironically, it would be WhatsApp was the one that taught me most about scale. In Google, I also worked on sort of Hulk and maps and geolocation data, and that was fairly massive. Google Search, there's all kinds of funny stories about Google Search as well that I think I can share. One of which was Al Gore visited Google office one time, and me and a guy called Amit, one of the first engineers at Google, they had built this search queries that shows up in pings. Well, he had built the original version. I only came to help him later. And we did not filter out porn queries. And that led to a big funny situation where Al Gore was sitting in front of porn queries going, because porn is one of the most top Google searches. And so a lot in Google Search and WhatsApp in particular, just the sheer quantity that has happened. And then when you're at that scale, you have to consider different things. Like, for example, if you have a 1% error rate or 0.5% error, in most cases, no one cares about. But when you're at 3 billion, 4 billion daily active users, or, I don't remember the current numbers of Google searches, that 1% scales up really fast.
Yeah, I bet.
And then all of a sudden now you're millions and hundreds of millions of encounters are poor. That's a very big deal. And all kinds of infrastructure cases, shifting towards big data calculation. What does that mean at that scale? One of the earliest things that we learned was experimentations. When you have small experiments, or when statistics was first developed, sample size was very hard to come by. So that's why you had a sample size of 5 or 10, and then later on you go to thousands or hundreds of thousands. But when you get to Google scale, and literally the smallest thing is hundreds of thousands, you get to millions or tens of millions, then everything is statistically significant. It doesn't matter what you do. If it's statistically significant, because it's going to move in that range. So the question is, how do you tell if it's really significant? And then the interplay, right? Like you assume every search query is independent, but they're actually tied to the user. Then you could search by user, but then the same users from day to day. And a query might be a refinement of a previous query. So when you do your experiments, a lot of the statistical significance assumptions are independence between them, but they're not independent. So one of the favorite parts I had about Google, and a shout out to Diane Tang and Amr Najmi and Hal Varian and others, is they were able to really re-envision what that world will look like. They designed overlapping experiment infrastructure. They designed the MapReduce with Jeff Dean. They conceptualized how to calculate statistical significance at that scale, which was unproven math before. And so remember going back to the story of why did I not end up going? I ended up in the world's best PhD program at Google. I got to work on new innovative products. I got to work with incredibly brilliant people, and I learned so much. I still went back to finish my PhD, and unfortunately, my professor died shortly thereafter. So I never finished it. I went back to Google, but I have no regrets of going. It was the best job, the best sort of learning environment I could have had. It was such a great incubation period for me.
And you became the person who rescued failing projects. So what does that mean? What does a failing engineering culture look like from the inside as well, and especially in those types of companies?
So Google in 2005 and 2006 is very different than it is today. And they were trying really hard, and they hired brilliant people, and they were pushing on core advances. And a lot of times those projects failed, and that was fine. And in fact, Google rewarded it and encouraged it. In fact, I worked on a project for over 2 years with Armor. It failed, and it was fine. No one came to rescue us and stuff. Failing was perfectly okay. What the problem and what Google defined or other such companies defined as failing was that an issue occurred or it was not working, but people did not notice it. It was having impact, and no one knew how to fix it. And it was a core bet. So otherwise we could not afford to fail. I mean, Google Plus failed, right? And that was, again, okay. Google moved on, right? So question is, how do we resolve this? And how did I became known about that was early on. I would notice problems in small systems. Like I noticed a problem in the map system where they were not connecting time zones correctly and stuff. And early on, more senior people than me noticed bigger problems. And I would look into it because I got curious, and I would teach myself how did they catch it, what were they proposing. In one situation, a senior person found a problem, escalated it, and then moved on, and the problem was not fixed. But then I noticed it wasn't fixed, and I escalated again, and it was not fixed again. And so I went and followed up a third time, and our VP at the time is Sridhar Almaswani, who's the CEO of Snowflake currently. And this area blew up, and I got assigned by this VP to handle the project and oversee it. It was the first big make or break project. I was still a junior. I was very, very young in Google. I was only in Google for 2 years at that time.
And for those that don't know, what leveling was that in Google?
That'll be a 4.
Level 4.
So I was a level 4.
You were managing this critical project at the time.
I would project managing, not human managing. I was too young. I was too junior to manage humans. But I got assigned to oversee it. I essentially relocated to LA. I won't name the project here. And really helped turn that project around. We formed a great relationship with the people down there. And then it was a huge success. And I was able to work with very senior people. I mean, the person in charge of the project was a director. And here I am coming as a level 4 and sort of overseeing it. And people on the project were senior, several levels above me. So I got promoted after this project. And then I kept being assigned to, hey, we have a problem. Go figure this out. This is going too slow. And so I joked that I was like the SWAT team for a while, sent in to save this stuff. And I got to work on tons of projects as a result, Hulk and Newfie and YouTube and Google Suggest and Chrome and Earth Map, everything. And it was a lot of fun. So I got a wide exploration of things and was able to really, and I was glad I was able to go in, identify, turn things around, work on my ombudsperson skill set, and I learned a lot of technical skills. I really enjoyed it.
I mean, it's interesting because some people, like you say, make or break, they could have broken their career potentially to some extent within Google, right? Especially at that time and that period, and in terms of the bar and how high it was and so forth. During that time then, who were the best operators or leaders? I know you mentioned a few that you observed in that era that have obviously gone on to do great things, and what they did differently and how they then inspired you.
I'll call out a few, and then I'm worried that others who I don't call out might be bothered. But there's a few really, really great leaders that I will call out. The first actually is Larry Page. Now I didn't work closely with him. He's we're not best friends, right? But Larry early on knew what he was good at and what he wasn't. He hired Eric Schmidt to really build the company. He trained under him. A lot of CEOs and founders don't have that maturity, right? Eric turned Google into a business. Mark did the same thing with Sheryl Sandberg, but he remained CEO and she was COO. In Larry's case, he literally stepped down and reported to Eric and learned a lot. That was incredibly inspiring. That humility was fantastic. Diane Tang and Amr Najmi, In fact, I named my second child after Amr. Those two were extremely important in my career. Diane is brilliant, incredibly has a lot of foresight and stuff, and moves fast and pushes hard, holds a high bar with a great deal of compassion. I've only broken down crying in my at work twice. Once was in front of her, and she was an incredibly tough person. And I didn't have a good English language at the time. And there's a funny story. I went by puppy at Google, and she kept telling me I was barking up the wrong tree, and I thought she was referring to my name, but she turned out I was going the wrong path. I didn't realize what she meant. I did not know the idioms. She got me a book of idioms. She would sit down next to me as a senior director, or later on a VP, and teach me how to say no to people and time manage. And it was, just the level of care and compassion she showed. Amr was brilliant. I learned so much from him. I wouldn't go. He was really good at operational. He knew how to inspire people. He was able to identify and block things. And the key thing I learned from all of those people at Google was they knew their strength and knew how to play to their strengths. So I thought that a leader had to be like good at everything, but they weren't. I won't say now who was, but one of those people lost their temper regularly and would yell. Another one was fairly reserved. The third one was highly academic, but they played to their strength. They hired people that compensated for their weaknesses. They identified their strengths. They used this a lot, and they worked a lot on their strengths. And they had this really well-developed framework, so they didn't have to keep making decisions all the time. The early part of the framework was you spend a lot of time in your 20s and 30s growing and when you're young, you compensate for weaknesses. In 20s and 30s, you try things. By a certain point, you leverage your strength, not your weaknesses. So you go all in on your strengths, and you go.
Keep saying that to me.
Yeah. And then they also had created structure, so there wasn't chaos, but not so much structure that there's come all these overridden processes. And they understood that structure was in place to remove decision fatigue. So I'm not deciding what to do or where to go. But if people did not follow the process, they didn't care as long as the job was done. Right. And so, for example, they put an agenda. Here's the agenda. We go through it. They minimize meeting overheads. But if people come in and say, hey, I have something important, and they ignored the agenda, that was fine as long as it was in fact important. They prioritized care a lot. And so those were excellent leaders. When I moved to WhatsApp, I was inspired by Will Cathcart a lot. And I had Chris Daniels and Matthew Dima and others, all excellent. But Will was able to always remain calm, took over WhatsApp in a very difficult stage, was able to really lead with vision. He was actually my age, just the first senior leader that I reported to that was literally my peer. And I saw a huge gap between me and him. So he was inspiring to me. And I wanted to achieve what he could naturally do. He was a product person through and through. I was a tech person. But his ability to make decisions, and I was so inspired by a lot of people who are diplomatic and skilled. They play it safe, but Will, I don't know, maybe because he was raised by lawyers, but was like, no, this is wrong. We're going to sue them, and he went out and made very hard, critical decisions in such a fast pace that I learned that you do not need to have all the data to make a decision. And you really need to, and he took accountability when there were mistakes, when there was privacy policy and other errors. He took accountability. And I got to learn at the hands of exceptional leaders. And their humility, their strengths, their ability to focus, was what led them to be highly effective operators.
And were there some key, to work with all of those people, were there some key things to play to your strengths that you installed in yourself that you then installed into the teams that you built? Yeah.
I'm going to be very candid. I don't think I had much strengths. I don't know what they saw in me. In fact, to this date, I share my feedback that I got from them with my team. One of the hardest feedback I ever got. This was my lowest point in my career. And I would share it with my team to say, look, this is the feedback you're getting, but this is the quality feedback that you have to write. But I guess what they saw was talent and potential, right? Mostly. But I definitely don't think I had good strengths. I was unstructured. One of my earliest problems was I signed up for too many stuff, so it was too chaotic. I was, and I learned from them. Like I paid attention to their strength and I adapted it. I took from Will his eloquence and his calm demeanor. I took from Omer his attention to detail and his ability to build and focus on really technical, insightful deals. I took from Diane her visionary approach and her ability to elevate the team. And I took from Mubarak her level of care and compassion for team members. So the way I approached it was, if I found something in a leader I admired, I would take and I will turn around and I will impose on it. From Google and WhatsApp taught me a lot. They taught me OKRs and snippets and things. And while now I don't bring that heavy level of process to the team because I want them to move faster, more agile, that structure I still really admire. So I would every week write, this is what I have to do this week, and this is what I did next week and stuff. It keeps me focused. I block out focus time during the day. I tell the team to do it. I will help review their meeting cadence once a month to ensure that they're free and clear. I'm extremely clear in what I want the team to accomplish. I prioritize very heavily structured, constructive feedback. And I provide that feedback on a weekly basis so the team knows how to improve it. I will call them in and I set an incredibly high bar of quality to launch. Recent example, for example, I've been helping Property Finder and there's an exciting launch that's coming out. Hopefully it will be great. When I first came in, it wasn't the bar I would like, and I literally doubled the threshold for them to launch, and they've made it.
How did you do that?
Again, I don't want to disclose too much about it because it's coming out, and I wanna let Property Finder have its moment in the sun. But it's a really cool launch, and in it they set a certain coverage and quality bar in terms of data mapping and things, and it was below what I thought would be good from a user point of view. So I pushed my team, who's responsible for that, and I said, well, what do you think we can actually achieve? And so they came up with a number that they thought they could achieve with a lot of hard work. And then I came back with a different number that I thought was actually the minimum bar we need to launch. And my minimum bar was higher than their number. And I said, okay, you have to get to this. And then they weren't sure how. So I sat and I worked with them on it. We worked through the coverage and the mapping and everything else we had to do. And at first they didn't believe, but they started seeing gains as they started working on it. And at first I was heavily involved and I worked with them on the technical side and I reviewed them every day, but eventually I backed off and the team surpassed the expectations. And I think the biggest difference and what I learned from US versus what I've seen here is that people here don't always know what great is. And therefore they don't know what they can possibly achieve. They're like, okay, this is good enough. I look around, this is good enough. This is right.
You have to show them.
Yeah. And this is a philosophy I've had ever since I was a child. This one I think is definitely me. In high school, I remember giving a speech to the team, to my classmates, saying, I want to reach for the stars because even if I fail, I'm still in the air. Right. And the whole point was I was not willing to accept anything less than 100% on every exam. And even if I failed, I still got good scores, right? When we built a recycling program in Lebanon, I was not willing to accept anything less than us having a nationwide recycling program that reinvents Lebanon. Clearly, as you can see, we failed. We have not done that. When I was doing a science project on the mechanics of Argile, I went really in depth and I spent my life trying to learn. You keep setting a really high bar for yourself. And like recently I'm facing health challenges. So I set a bar for myself of losing 40 kilos in 3 months. I failed, but I lost 20. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, you look great from when I last saw you.
Thank
as
you.
well. And you know, it's good to always have these targets in place anyway. And as you mentioned many times, you don't seem scared to fail, but you like to set the bar high to do it. So.
I am a lifelong failure. I want to fail in everything I do.
So look, I just want to index back on WhatsApp as well. You built WhatsApp's data and analytics org from 4 to 200 plus globally. Like, how do you actually scale a team like that without actually breaking culture at the same time?
Oh, we built culture. We didn't just break it. We built culture. WhatsApp was an amazing company, but they were very anti-data, and rightly so. WhatsApp wanted to be privacy first, and they believe if you log data, you were not private. And there was a very valid belief, because then if a government came after you, you had to turn over data and you couldn't do it. So when I came in, it was fairly antagonistic, right? I was not warmly welcomed by WhatsApp. Well, I mean by the engineering team, not by the leadership. Obviously, I was hired, so the leadership team wanted me. I had never managed before. It was my first time managing and leading a team. And the first thing I did was I went out and I hired people who were both good at their jobs and resilient. And I hired junior people. And I went for junior people because I knew they would be willing to take direction, and they would not always then challenge everyone, and they would give the way to the engineers. And then I went and I solved the engineering problems. Like, you tell me what your biggest problem was, and we're going to solve it for you. And the biggest problem at the time was integrity. So here I was being hired primarily to help grow and develop WhatsApp, and also Facebook really wanted access to the data, and it was that was a whole separate fight with Mark and others. But instead, I focused on solving engineering problems, and we built and we worked with the integrity team, and we figured out how, with no data and privacy aware, how to protect against child porn, how to protect against terrorism. And that was a good win. And then I developed a data policy. This is how you have to record to be able to do X, Y, Z. And I gave the entire control over to the engineering team. And the data organization at this point was 8 people, and they were furious. Like, we already can't do anything, and now you're giving us, like, you're saying, I can't get permission to do anything unless I ask an engineer first. I'm like, yes. And the CTO went out and spoke on that behalf and said, we're implementing this, and the engineering team is going to run it. And so everyone on the engineering team was on board because they had control. And then I just had my data team teach the engineers why this was important. So at first it was very slow. They had to one-on-one convince engineers why they had to log stuff. And we logged it in a privacy-aware way. We logged it without any IDs or associated users. We did not log a lot of the information that we could have logged. And we logged things like if your app, what happens when your app crashes, so we can debug it. We logged bandwidth issues so we can help improve things, and we solved those problems. And then when we had to handle earning reports, we instead of giving WhatsApp data to Facebook, we took Facebook's data and then all the matching ourselves, and then turned over the number that what the Facebook needed for its earning numbers. And the engineering team and eventually became so supportive of us that they turned over the entire program back to our control, which was the plan all along. And at that point, they started saying, "We need data people. We need this. We need that. We need to be able to move faster." And they saw the engineers who worked with data people accelerated, and the engineers who did not. And so the engineering organization started giving us extra headcount. They will give up engineers to hire more data people. And 4 years later, we were a big organization.
Oh, and during that time, obviously, WhatsApp doubled its user base and monetized. Like, what was probably one of the hardest strategic decisions you had to make to obviously support that as well?
Oh, that was also during, that was also pre and during COVID. So we had all kinds of problems and hard strategic stuff. And again, here, like Chris Daniels and Will Cathcart and Matthew Edema were the key leaders who led us through that transition. The first strategic decision I had to make initially was what data to collect and how to analyze And here I took a lot of insights from Alex Schultz, who's the CMO of Facebook, on what to build and what to look at to help grow WhatsApp and protect us and whatever things, and what features and use cases we needed to build. And that insights provided us with good strategic decisions and bets to make. And of course, we had the rising competition of Telegram and Signal, and WhatsApp was relatively slow in development at the time. And so one of the hardest decisions that I had to make is that despite the success of the data team in accelerating stuff, it was now slowing launches, because to launch something, you have to implement all the logging and things. So we had to redesign a new logging policy, which I worked with Ami and Nitin on, and we agreed to launch some things without having all the logging in place, and that you build it later on as you go. We had a huge challenge around WhatsApp payments in India, and what's the right strategic thing to do. We got it wrong for over a year, and eventually we figured it out and we managed to launch it. Monetization wasn't easy. There was massive arguments between WhatsApp and Facebook about how to monetize WhatsApp. I can't go into greater details in that, but that took a long time as well.
One of the big arguments?
It was one of the biggest arguments. I'll tell you one story. A member of my team did an analysis that ran counter to a published Facebook statement by Mark on what we should be doing. And he says, this analysis shows it's not going to work. Now, normally when you have an analysis that counteracts not only your own CEO, but literally the CEO of your parent company, you run it by your boss first, right? It's a courtesy, and then you publish it, and we get to do something. But no, he goes ahead and publishes it anyway. And I get called into this office saying, where did this come from? Why didn't you tell us? All this other stuff. And I'm like, well, I helped my member with this. If that was the right call, apologies. Any lack of notifications on me. This is the right analysis. We should rethink our strategy. And to Facebook's credit, they were very open to these kind of conversations. They weren't surprised, or it wasn't an antagonistic thing. But still, to counteract a publicly directed strategy, usually you'll be like, hey, wait a second, I think this is against that. You run it up the chain, and then you give them a chance to say, we've now changed strategy onto X, Y, Z, right? You don't have this massive, right? And so I publicly took the hit, and I turned around to him and I said, what the hell are you doing, man?
Afterwards.
It's like, but it was very fun. It was very fun to do. And again, WhatsApp and Facebook were open to this kind of environment and discussion, so it was okay. And those were massive debates, massive strategy. As well as a lot of what happened with the NSO and organization that we ended up suing. Those are really hard strategy decisions. And I remember a moment where we were in the government of India, and we were trying to understand how we could send messages back and forth without knowing who the people were. Right? This is how we built this end-to-end encrypted. We don't but that part was extremely difficult for them to understand. It was a wonderful scene in the ministry. I don't know. These are great moments.
I mean, on that, on the privacy-aware data, and there was a core philosophy around it. What's the misconception that people still have about privacy versus personalization?
I actually wouldn't call it a misconception right now. It's because right now, well, maybe it is. Okay. So a lot of people believe that to do personalization, you have to record a lot of data and it has to be personally identifiable. And that's just not true. Absolutely, if you record a lot of data at the personal scale, you will get a far more better personalization. That's not an argument. It's easier to do and it's more effective. But you can get incredibly important personalization without having to record everything about you and all your backgrounds and all your use cases. And you're also able to do it in such a way that we don't have to know about you. You can create a zero trust architecture where me as a company does not actually know your details, but your details are stored somewhere, and then my model can predict based off of your details. And that's the part that people are missing. Is just that they store all this data and they keep it, and I will say this region is not the best on privacy.
We'll come to that shortly.
Okay. Yeah.
Last question on this before we move to sort of the current times. You've sat in the room where decisions affect billions of people.
Yeah.
What's the emotional weight of that?
Oh, really huge. I've had to make decisions that affected billions of people. I mean, ultimately, I guess to be very candid, I was always, the data and the eye guy, whether it was a VP role or a chief role or whatever. So ultimately, the CEO holds the pen. But in a lot of those cases, the CEO defers to their expert.
Yeah.
Right. So you make those decisions, and some of them are easy. You're deciding on the product that's being used by billions of people, and you're excited. This is a good feature. People are going to use it. I want to launch it. I want to launch it fast. I want to launch it yesterday. Those are good. Those are good emotional weights. Shutting down a product that's useful in an area because it's not financial sense to the company, but literally millions of people use, is a hard decision. And that was sort of tough. There's decisions that we had to make, and again, I can't go into specific details, but at one point in one of the companies I was working in, actually in both of them, we had to decide about potentially walking away from billions of people. And that was really, really hard and massive decisions because you believe in your product, you believe it's good for the world and how to use it. And then there are also emotional things. WhatsApp is used in war zones, and so then there's real life. Now they're not affecting millions or billions, you're affecting 100,000s or so, but at a much more intimate level, like as in their safety is on the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those were the ones I found the hardest.
Yeah. And I thought of this here now. It wasn't actually put on the script, but like thinking of like Facebook, Google, WhatsApp, incredible companies, incredible people. I'm sure there's loads of stories outside of work as well of incredible conversations that you've had, that you've met people. Is there any conversations that you had over the last 20 years, or probably 10, 15 years ago, that now today you're seeing some of those conversations maybe come to light into what people's building, the future of the world, the economy?
Yeah.
Any particular stories that...
The problem is I don't know what stories I can share. I would probably say my conversation with Joel Lonsdale. We don't always see eye to eye on a lot of political issues. But so Joel, for those who don't know, Joel Lonsdale is the founder of Palantir, the founder of Adapar, of 8VC, of OpenGov, and a bunch of others. Is a good friend of mine from college, and we don't see eye to eye on things, and I definitely have disagreements with him on a few things, but we both had differing views on where the world was going to go. I think he was right over me in those conversations, which probably explains why he's a billionaire and I'm not. That said,
any particular things that he said that we're seeing today?
I wish I had known about this question. I would have asked him first.
Yeah.
And look, let's be very candid here. Palantir has a mixed reputation in this area, in this region, rightfully so. I have a complicated view of that company. But he like, remember, I grew up basically in the world of openness and transparency. We were bringing people together, democratizing information through Google, connecting people through WhatsApp and Meta, very much on the B2C side of things. And Joe came from the B2B environment, more defense-oriented, high security analysis, helping enforce borders and the like.
Yeah.
And then we can see where the world is today, and
where they sit. Yeah.
Where we sit.
Quick. So just once before we move into the today narrative, obviously, So your quick, succinct answers to this when I say
Yeah, sorry, I'm a very verbose.
no, just in these ones. So we're all good. So what is fundamentally different about building products here in MENA versus Silicon Valley?
I think what I already said initially, people here are. I don't think they always believe themselves enough to build great. They settle for good.
Yeah. In your view, is MENA in a leapfrog moment?
Yes.
What is the window and who will miss it?
I think the window is only a couple of years left. And I think at this point, several countries have already missed it. I think only UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia are in the running in this region. US, China. I'm worried about most of Europe.
Where's the first $1 billion AI consumer adoption wave going to hit in the region?
Look, candidly, that has to be the US. So it's going to come from the US, and then and honestly, the only place it could hit is in the UAE. So you're asking where? I think. Would you mean what?
Yeah.
Okay. So everyone right now is trying to compete in the LLM infrastructure space. I don't think that's where the $1 billion is going to be made in the region. It's going to be made on the application space. What exactly application, I don't know. Very candidly, probably the first claim to that $1 billion would be taking an existing $1 billion company, either Property Finder or Careem or others, and retrofitting it to become AI first, and then now it becomes an AI. And I know some of them are companies already trying. Talabat and others are trying to do that, and I think that's a good thing. EAN is investing very heavily in this, among others. But the first sort of native AI application that will hit $1 billion, I don't know yet in what space that's going to be.
And you're here now. You're in the Middle East. You've been advising. You've been doing consulting. You've been advising governments.
Yep.
When you look at the last 24 months, especially with someone with your background in terms of where you've actually been invested in real AI and data, etc., for a long time, what is real versus hype?
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm going to start by answering a different question, which is I'm extremely happy and grateful to be here. I moved here during a tough time in my life to take care of sick family members. And so I took a step away from my career. And from there, I ended up advising both governments and companies, and in some cases working hands-on. And so I got that experience. But I do want to start by saying that even though I put claims on like they don't know what great is here all the time, they have raw talent, and it is a really good region. We have the resources, we have the talent, we have the appetite. And we're seeing a number of people coming in. I really believe in this region. I think the Middle East is going to go far, and I'm so happy about that because I believe this. So I wanted to say that. That was important to me. So what is real versus hype? Right now, a lot of people are chasing hype. And a lot of the generative AI initiatives are failing. I remember going to conferences and hearing people say AI has only been around for a few years. I'm like, what have I been doing for the last 20 years? They don't quite realize they're just retrofitting. They're taking AI will solve all my problems, so they'll try to do an agent. It's like a chat GPT prompt on top of it, or they scrape a bunch of data and then they use it. And it does accelerate a lot of stuff, which has resulted in a lot of things coming that have high valuation but don't have much weight behind it. Most people don't understand the impact of AI on changing business modes. Most people don't realize the importance of your own proprietary data and don't realize how to truly value your proprietary data. This region is way too heavily invested in consultants. And consultants are great. I end up working. I've been a consultant for the last year, I guess. They actually know a lot. They know a lot because they talk to a lot of people, and so they gather a lot of knowledge. But they don't have as much execution practice. And what people really need to do is just get their hands dirty and try. It takes about 2 years to mature mature an AI product to really understand it, you have to watch out for the Jevons paradox.
What is that for?
So Jevons paradox is something that normally comes up in urban city planning, where essentially you have traffic congestion, so you build a bunch of roads, and then more people use the roads. And then you end up with more traffic congestion than you had before because now people buy cars and more access and stuff. And basically, it states that the more efficient something makes, the more you actually utilize it, and the less efficiency gains you get. So a lot of people think that AI will self-fund itself. I will launch AI, somehow I will save a bunch of costs, and I'll be more efficient than I was before. They're not accounting for the fact that people will be resistant to working on something that will make them lose their jobs. And that if they have AI, their business will grow, and now they'll actually have more costs and not the team ready to staff it and back it up. And you need actual expertise. If you use contractors and consultants, then you are building your IP outside, but no one inside actually knows how to run it or do it. And effectively, I mean, what has time and time proven is the basic parables of building a good business. You build a good team. You go team first, you build the right thing. You focus on your IP, you focus on what differentiates you. You buy or contract out everything else. None of it matters. If it's not on your direct line, it doesn't matter. You have very few priorities. You focus in. You align leadership on the consequences of it. So you do all that, you avoid the pitfalls, which McKinsey and MIT will say 85% of AI products don't show ROI. Well, yeah, if you do those basics, you get it right.
And is that why you'd say that, I was going to ask you, like, what do CEOs still misunderstand about building a data-driven organization? And does that come into some of the things that you're saying exactly there?
Yes, I will, a lot of it actually. So I think there's a few things that they I would say they still misunderstand. The first is that true data governance, understanding lineage, the quality data pipeline is a distinct skill set from traditional engineering. A lot of engineers know how to build and scale production systems, but they never cared about the pipeline of data internally. They have to learn it. In order to really build, you cannot have a singular AI team that does everything. It will work for some cases, but if you do that, you will end up with one team trying to inject intelligence to everything. And I do believe that we are more and more moving to AI. I think there's a lot of hype around a lot of things, but I don't think that the AI wave is a hype. You'll go through the plateau and it's overblown, but it's going to be fundamentally changed the way we are, just like mobiles did.
So what would you say is your framework then for evaluating whether an AI initiative is actually working?
Well, I actually do three things. First of all, I define extremely key metrics and ROI around it. If I cannot align leadership around it, then it will always fail. Second, so once we have the key metric ROI and we know what the goal is that we're trying to do, I then try to build the team with the right skill sets. You don't get the right skill sets, it will fail. If it's a core team, if it's a core IP, I build it internally. If it's not core, like a chat bot or something, I'm happy to buy, right? Why spend your resources and time doing it? And then the third key component of the framework is execution. Really drive them hard, daily updates, hold a high quality bar, get your hands dirty, try things, look up online or different things. That's it.
And do you think like the companies that are wasting money on these AI transformations, all of these foundations that you've just mentioned there, they're probably what they're getting wrong, and bringing in the consultants that you mentioned that lack that execution?
Yeah. Well, before I get attacked by every consulting company, including the ones I work with, bringing in consultants is not a waste of money.
Yeah.
But what they often get wrong is a lot of people are so desperate to chase the AI train that they will just they'll try to slap any AI on top, and they'll miss the underlying fundamentals. So in one company that I worked here longer than others, or I helped longer than others, I focused a lot on revamping the fundamentals. I let go of 30% of the team. restructured them, really bulked up their AI skill sets, gave space for it, slowed it down. The competitor launched an AI bot very quickly. Our CEO was very upset when the AI bot was started recommending the company I was helping versus the competitor. So their own bot was recommending their competitor. They became very happy that we didn't rush in, and now they're accelerating dramatically in AI. And I do believe the fundamentals I put in place really helped them because they built on top of a strong basis.
The same with everything in life, right? The foundations. So I'm just going to finish up on some leadership and culture before we move to the quick fire and finish. What are the wrong mental models that leaders carry into data and AI organizations?
So I think they still think of data as a support function and AI as everything. They think of AI as a feature and not as an infrastructure. And they think of data as just give me data. They don't understand that now data has to live in production systems. It has to be easily accessible. It has to have low latency in order for AI to thrive. You have to have a lot of it. You have to have proprietary data. You have to have good governance and security. I believe they also think of oftentimes you have to have a central data and AI organization versus democratizing AI across the entire engineering organization.
And what separates people who scale with the company, especially right now, versus the ones who don't?
So we are in a transformative period, and I will say that even if you see someone who looks like they're farther ahead in AI, there are not that many who have actually been in AI for 20 plus years.
Everyone's an AI specialist.
Nowadays, everyone's an AI specialist. I would say that the people who differentiate themselves now are go back to the skill sets I talked about early on, which was one strength I thought I had was I was very willing to learn and I paid attention and I applied myself to learn. I learn every day. I learn from those who are more senior than me. I learn from those who are more junior than me. And I think if you do that, especially now in a transformative period, you'll be fine.
If you had to teach one lesson to every single engineering leader, what is it?
Execution. There's so many people who I think, execution with quality. Yeah.
What is a belief you hold about AI that almost nobody agrees with you on?
I don't know if no one agrees with me on it. I think Andrew Ng is aligned, at least from his talks. I haven't talked to him in a while. He was my professor back in college. But it's not something I see often talked about here. So everyone here talks about how data is the new oil of AI and AI is going to be everywhere. But Andrew talks about AI as electricity, right? It's not, electricity, you can argue electricity is everywhere, but it's much more a fundamental architecture now that can drive a lot. And now you have everyone from a small company to a big company can utilize it. I still believe supervised learning, traditional AI is valuable over the next 10 years. Everyone now is all in generative AI. I actually think you should not give up supervised learning. But also you should treat AI as an infrastructure and have a cohesive AI strategy and not build this AI feature, this AI feature, this AI feature. This is what I see here a lot.
Yeah. So here we are, the quick fire round to finish up. So you can just give one word answers however you feel. Most underrated technical book to understand data and AI?
Pass on this one.
Most overrated term people use when talking about AI?
Generative AI.
One job that gets more valuable because of AI?
Actually, customer support.
One job that disappears the fastest because of AI?
Customer support.
Both. Open source versus closed models, who wins long term?
Closed models.
The region that will surprise the world in AI innovation?
This region.
The Middle East, that is. Yeah. GPU shortage, temporary or structural?
Temporary.
One startup category you would invest in for the next 5 years?
Applications. The application of AI.
You've led teams of 200 plus and beyond. What is the one hiring mistake pretty much every engineering leader makes.
Including me.
Yeah.
We're too often too focused on hiring for our current needs and not willing to take our time to hire the right leaders.
Yeah, I agree. One sentence: the future of work in a world of AI is
enjoyable.
And last but not least, the WhatsApp boardrooms, decisions that the public has never seen. If I can get that with you.
Yeah, I can't. Sorry. I can't.
Try and squeeze that in. What can I get? Catch you off guard.
No. I look. I will say this. Both Google and WhatsApp mean a lot to me. They are stellar, amazing companies. In fact, I'll give a shout out to a couple of companies. Those two have taught me a lot. They care a lot about their users. We agonize in WhatsApp a lot about everything, including if only 100 users were impacted, or what do we do about the scale? And there's some things that we just cannot share, but it's public. Look at the NSO situation. There was all kinds of things that came up around privacy policy. There was a situation that occur in contentious regions, WhatsApp in Lebanon, and we agonize over how to react. And one of the hardest ones was me having to decide not to do something, and something that I cared a lot about. Mm-hmm. Honestly, the best company that I've seen right now in the Middle East is Property Finder. It's really, really good. Good culture, good, amazing, great place to work.
Where is it going, Property Finder? Like what
I'm extremely excited about their future. They have really re-envisioned what property will look like in a few years. There are a few launches I know are coming out very shortly. In fact, there's one launch recently. It was Avatar that led to 1,000% increase in leads. Yeah, they're treating AI seriously, and they're revamping, and they have a really aggressive roadmap plan. And I think it's a company to watch.
And if you were to try to convince someone from the Silicon Valley or in Europe that is an A player to come and join Property Finder, what would you say?
Property Finder is the Google of old of the Middle East.
Thank you for joining Breaking Down Barriers. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Sorry for not answering the book on the question of the book.
Oh, we can come back to it. We can put it in the comments.
Okay.
Thank you. And I've got one more thing to add for our audience. So I've got something interesting for you and a quick ask right now. 72% of the people who listen to this podcast every week are not subscribed. That's totally cool. But here's the thing. Subscribing helps unlock bigger guests, deeper insights, and the kind of episodes that genuinely make a difference to the ecosystem. So if you're taking value from the show right now, even once, could you hit that button? It's free, it takes 1 second, and it generally helps shape the future of this podcast. And who knows, you might tap into the reason why we get the CTO of Amazon next month.